All right, so get this, listeners. Today we're going deep, deep into the Maratha Confederacy.
Fascinating choice.
Yeah, these guys, they went from like a small territory
Mm-hmm.
to taking on like the Mughal Empire.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
And I want to know how they
Yeah.
pulled that off. So what was their secret sauce?
It all comes down to their system, their organizational structure. Really unique, kind of like a political puzzle, and we're going to break it down.
Okay, so I'm already intrigued. Lay it on me.
All right, so first thing to understand, the Marathas, they didn't function like those massive top-down empires you usually think of.
Okay, yeah, like the Mughals they were fighting. Very centralized.
Exactly. The Marathas were more like a network of powerful families, almost like a prototype for decentralized governance, but, centuries ago.
So no single emperor calling all the shots.
Well, there was the Chhatrapati, the figurehead leader, but it wasn't absolute power.
Okay, so there was a leader, but how do they keep things from falling apart?
Think of it this way, like a CEO, right?
Yeah.
But the CEO has to answer to a board of directors,
Right.
and that's where the Ashtapradhan Mandal comes in.
Oh, what now?
The Ashtapradhan Mandal. It was the Council of Ministers. Each minister had a specific area they were responsible for: finance, defense, foreign affairs.
Oh, okay. So a leader, a council, and then all these powerful families woven in. It sounds like a recipe for some power struggles, right?
Oh, absolutely. There were definitely tensions. These families, the Holkars, the Scindias, the Gaekwads, these were major players. They weren't just figureheads.
Wait, so they had their own armies?
Armies, land, they even dabbled in their own foreign policies sometimes. Can you imagine trying to keep that many strong personalities all on the same page?
It's mind-boggling. So how did they manage it? What kept them from constantly turning on each other?
Well, a few things. You've got the council and the Chhatrapati. They acted as a kind of like a referee. They smoothed things over, kept everyone focused on the big picture. And then there was the constant pressure from the Mughals.
Right, the massive empire they were battling.
Exactly. That shared enemy. Help keep those internal rivalries in check.
Smart. So it wasn't just brute force. They were like playing 4D chess to keep things together.
Oh, for sure. Alliances, family ties, don't underestimate those either. These clans often intermarried, forged those bonds of kinship. It all contributed to their cohesion.
Okay, but you can't build an empire on diplomacy alone, right? What about their military? What made them such formidable opponents?
Well, think about where they originated, the Deccan plateau. It's pretty rugged terrain, a lot of hills and valleys. And the Marathas, they used that to their advantage. They became masters of a type of warfare called Shivaji.
Hold on, Shivaji, is that like martial art or something?
It was more of a military doctrine, a set of principles that guided their strategies. See, the Marathas, they weren't about standing toe-to-toe with giant Mughal armies in open battle.
Too risky, right.
Exactly. They were all about speed, surprise, and knowing the land. Lightning-fast raids, hit-and-run tactics. They'd strike hard, disrupt supply lines, and then disappear back into those hills before the enemy could regroup. It was a brilliant way to wear down a larger, less mobile force.
And I bet it made them seem almost invincible, copping up here, then there, causing chaos.
Absolutely. It was psychological warfare as much as anything. It wasn't just about winning individual battles. It was about demoralizing the enemy, breaking their will to fight.
That's fascinating. So they were adaptable, strategic, knew how to use the land to their advantage. Very impressive.
Yeah.
But you need more than a strong military to build lasting power.
Of course. You need a way to hold on to that territory, to keep the money flowing. And that's where their system of alliances and revenue collection comes in. It's a story in itself.
Okay, now you've really got my attention.
So instead of just marching in and taking over, they had a more, let's say, cooperative approach.
Cooperative. Okay, I'm really curious now. Tell me more about this cooperative approach.
Well, they use these taxes, called Chath and Sardeshmukhi. Think of it almost like a protection racket, but with some serious benefits if you played along.
Hold on, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. A protection racket with benefits. Go on.
Okay, so Chath was basically like, hey, pay us a cut and we'll protect you. From us, obviously, and from any other troublemakers. Sardeshmukhi was an additional tax. It acknowledged their overall authority in the region.
So it was like, we're the top dogs, pay up, and you get our backing, don't, and you're on your own. That's pretty bold.
Bold, but also strategic. It allowed them to expand their influence without having to constantly wage war and manage every inch of land directly. It was about leveraging power, not just brute force.
It sounds like a win-win. Or maybe a win-win-lose if you were the one paying the taxes.
Yeah.
But was it always this smooth that anyone ever pushed back against these demands?
Oh, absolutely. There were rebellions, challenges, shifting alliances. Don't forget, this was a super complex political landscape with all sorts of players vying for power. The Marathas weren't always successful, and their system definitely had its flaws.
So it wasn't a foolproof system?
Not at all. But for a good chunk of time, it was remarkably effective, and it definitely gave the Mughals a run for their money.
I'm starting to see why. But tell me, was it all about power and conquest for the Marathas? Or was there more to their story?
That's a great question, and one we should definitely explore. Because it's easy to get caught up in the military and political maneuvering. But the Marathas were more than just conquerors. They had a rich culture, distinct artistic style, and a story that goes way beyond the battlefield.
So we've talked about how the Marathas built this incredible empire, this web of families, their military tactics, that whole system of alliances and taxes. But how did they actually govern everything? Did they even have a solid administrative structure? Or were they just focused on, expanding?
That's where it gets even more interesting. The Marathas, they weren't just warriors and strategists, they were also surprisingly innovative administrators. I mean, they had to be. They were managing this vast, complex confederacy.
All right, so spill the beans. What kind of administrative magic were they working?
Well, one of their key innovations was their revenue system.
Okay, but haven't we already talked about taxes?
Yeah, but this is different. They went beyond just, demanding a cut. They actually developed a system based on assessing the productivity of the land itself.
So wait, they were actually evaluating how fertile the land was before deciding how much tax to collect. That's pretty forward thinking.
Exactly. They understood that a stable and prosperous empire, it needed a fair and predictable revenue system. So they sent officials out to assess the quality of the soil, the types of crops grown, all those factors that influenced how much revenue the land could generate.
So they weren't just squeezing people for every last rupee.
Not at all. This land productivity assessment, it ensured that taxes weren't too burdensome, and it actually encouraged people to cultivate the land and increase its yield.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah.
Like a happy farmer is a productive farmer, right?
Precisely. But managing a confederacy this large, it took more than just a clever tax system. They had other administrative tricks up their sleeves, too.
Oh, I bet. What else did they do?
They were keenly aware of the dangers of, one family becoming too powerful and upsetting the whole balance.
Makes sense.
Right. So they created this system of checks and balances within the Confederacy. Think of it as a way to, keep everyone's ambitions in check.
Sort of like a political safety net. How did that work in practice?
Well, they had a council that advised the Chhatrapati, and they rotated key positions among a different family. So no one family could, monopolize power. And believe it or not, they even had a relatively tolerant religious policy compared to other empires of the time anyway.
So not only were they politically savvy, they were also, ahead of their time on religious tolerance. I'm impressed.
This tolerance helped them a lot. I mean, it helped them gain support from diverse communities within their territory, essential for maintaining stability. They understood that a diverse and inclusive empire, well, it's a stronger empire.
It's pretty amazing how they managed to juggle all of this.
Yeah.
Military prowess, alliances, administrative innovations, and religious tolerance on top of it all. They were like the ultimate multitaskers.
They really were. And, their story really challenges a lot of the traditional narrative of Indian history. They weren't just reacting to the Mughals. They were actively shaping their destiny. They built this unique, powerful political system that, honestly, for a time, it rivaled the greatest empires of the age.
It really makes you wonder.
Yeah.
What if things had gone differently? Could they have kept going, kept thriving, become this dominant force in India?
That's the question, isn't it? Historians have been debating that for centuries. And while we can't rewind history, we can still learn from their successes and, even their failures. The Marathas, their story isn't just about battles and conquests. It's a story about the challenges of building and maintaining this kind of decentralized system, the importance of adaptability, the balance between unity and autonomy.
It's true. It's a good reminder that even the most innovative, successful systems, well, they can face all sorts of pressures. Pressures that can lead to their decline.
Exactly.
Which leads to a question I've been thinking about. We've talked about their rise, their military genius, the administration. But what about their downfall? How did this confederacy that seemed so unstoppable, how did it all fall apart?
Ah, yes, the downfall. That's where things get a little more complicated, a little more messy, maybe. This is where we see how even the most brilliant systems, well, they can be vulnerable to internal divisions and external threats. As the Maratha Confederacy grew, well, those powerful families, the ones that were their initial strength, they started to become, well, more and more independent. So those powerful families, the ones that had been their strength, they start to become more and more independent.
Right, like we were saying, too many lead singers.
Exactly. And as time goes on, those divisions, they just get deeper. Ambitions get harder to control, and they're facing a new kind of adversary now, the British.
The British East India Company.
Right,
Yeah.
the British,
Yeah.
a force with a centralized structure, huge resources, and a long-term strategy for domination.
And the Marathas weren't quite ready for that.
They weren't. The British, they exploited those divisions, turned family against family, classic divide and conquer strategy.
So the Maratha system, their strength, it becomes their weakness.
Sadly, yeah. It's a classic irony.
It makes their story even more, well, fascinating, doesn't it?
Mhm.
This amazing rise to power, these innovations, and then this downfall. It reminds us that even the most brilliant systems, they have to adapt to survive.
They do. It's a key takeaway. The Marathas, they teach us that success can be fleeting. Unity, it's precious. And that adaptability, essential. The world never stops changing.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Maratha Confederacy, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's important to remember that the Marathas weren't just conquerors. They were innovators, administrators, patrons of the arts. They left this lasting mark on India. And their story is a reminder history's full of surprises. Decentralized systems, they can achieve incredible things. And even in defeat, there are lessons to be learned. Valuable lessons.
And hey, listeners, if you're intrigued, if this has sparked your curiosity, don't stop here. There's so much more to discover about Maratha history, their art, their literature, how they organized their society, the impact they had on the regions they ruled. It's a journey worth taking, trust me.
Absolutely. And remember, history isn't just dates and battles. It's about understanding the forces that shaped our world, the choices people made, the challenges they faced, the legacies they left behind. And who knows? Maybe by studying the Marathas, we can even find some inspiration, some insights to help us navigate the complexities of our own time.
That's it for our deep dive this week, folks. See you next time.